The words were still echoing through the room when I slammed my hand on the oak table, rattling the wine glasses and sending a heavy silence crashing down around us. My mother gasped, my uncle froze with a fork halfway to his mouth, and my sister, oh my sister, Samantha, she had the audacity to smirk like the snake she truly was. "You think you're so clever?" I hissed, voice trembling with fury. "But not clever enough." I rose from my chair, heart hammering against my ribs like it was desperate to claw its way out of my chest, and reached into the inside pocket of my jacket, feeling the hard edge of the folder I had hidden there all night like a loaded weapon. All eyes were on me now. The festive dinner forgotten, the birthday balloons sagging pathetically against the ceiling, the roast chicken sitting untouched, growing cold. Samantha tilted her head slightly, feigning confusion, her blonde curls bouncing like she was some innocent little angel. She had been playing the long game, whispering lies into our father's ears while he was still breathing, pretending to be the dutiful daughter, the only daughter worthy of his trust. She thought she had buried the truth so deep that no one would ever find it. But I had found it. I had everything. "You lied," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut through bone. "You forged Dad's signature. You manipulated him when he was too sick to see straight. You stole what wasn't yours." Samantha's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Just a flicker, a tiny crack in her mask. But it was enough. The others might have missed it, but I had spent my whole life studying the way she moved, the way she deceived. She opened her mouth, no doubt to unleash some rehearsed excuse, but I was faster. I yanked the folder free and slammed it down on the table so hard that a glass tipped over, spilling red wine like blood across the pristine white tablecloth. "Read it," I demanded, my voice shaking but loud, commanding, undeniable. No one moved. It was like they were frozen, caught between loyalty and shock. "Go ahead, Sam," I sneered, stepping closer, letting the heat of my rage burn away the last shred of civility between us. "Tell them how you faked the second will. Tell them how you cut me out of the inheritance because you thought you deserved it more. Tell them." My mother whispered my name, a broken little sound that barely reached my ears. My uncle muttered a curse under his breath. The room was closing in, thick with tension, the smell of roasting meat suddenly sickening Samantha's. Hands, always so steady, trembled as she reached for the folder. She was still trying to act calm, still trying to maintain the image of the perfect daughter, the martyr, the one who sacrificed everything. But I saw the panic blooming behind her eyes. She flipped through the papers, each turn of the page exposing another layer of her betrayal. Her face drained of color, her lips pressed into a thin line. "It's not what you think," she started, but her voice cracked, the veneer of control slipping away from her like sand through her fingers. "I did it for the family. I did it because..." "Because you're greedy," I spat. "Because you couldn't stand the idea that maybe, just maybe, Dad loved me too." My chest heaved with the force of my anger, years of resentment and hurt and betrayal pouring out of me in a torrent I couldn't stop. "You wanted it all, Samantha. You wanted the house, the money, the land. You wanted to erase me. Well, guess what? I'm still here. And now, everyone knows exactly who you are." The silence was deafening. Samantha's hands dropped limply to her sides, the papers fluttering to the ground like dead leaves. My mother was crying openly now, great heaving sobs that shook her frail shoulders. My uncle sat back in his chair, his face a mask of disappointment and disgust. No one moved to defend her. No one said a word. I stood there breathing hard, feeling the weight of years of silence finally lift off my shoulders. I had been the black sheep, the afterthought, the one left out of whispered conversations and secret meetings. Not anymore. Samantha tried one last desperate play, stepping toward my mother with outstretched hands, her voice high and pleading. "Mom, please, you know I only did what was best." But my mother recoiled like she'd been struck, I watched as the last of Samantha's lies crumbled into dust, saw the way her face twisted in horror as she realized there was no coming back from this. She had gambled everything, and she had lost. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not even a little. I turned and walked out of the room without another word, leaving the chaos behind me, my fists clenched, my blood boiling with a wild, fierce satisfaction. She had tried to destroy me. She had tried to steal everything our father had left behind. But in the end, it was her own greed that had undone her. The night air hit me like a slap to the face as I stormed out onto the porch, the wooden boards groaning under my weight. I didn't stop. I couldn't. My body was moving on pure instinct, raw adrenaline surging through my veins, my mind a whirl of rage and vindication. Behind me, I could still hear the faint sounds of shouting, Samantha's desperate voice rising higher and higher, crumbling into sobs that made no impression on me. She was a master of crocodile tears, but tonight, there was no one left to believe her. Tonight, she stood alone. I stalked down the driveway, gravel crunching underfoot, the stars overhead spinning dizzyingly. For a moment, I thought I might scream, just unleash every ounce of pent-up fury into the vast emptiness of the night. But instead, I just laughed, a cold, bitter laugh that scraped against my throat like broken glass. It was done. I had ripped off the mask she wore so carefully, and the truth, ugly and bare, had scorched her for everyone to see. No more whispered doubts, no more second-guessing myself. I had won. My phone buzzed violently in my pocket, but I didn't need to look to know who it was. Samantha. She was desperate now, clawing at any last chance to salvage the wreckage. I yanked the phone out, stared at her name flashing on the screen, and then hurled it as hard as I could into the darkness. It disappeared, into the trees with a satisfying crack. Let her scream into the void. Let her beg all she wanted. I owed her nothing. When I finally stopped walking, I found myself at the edge of the old orchard, the one Dad used to take us to when we were kids. The trees loomed around me like silent sentinels, their twisted branches stark against the sky. Memories slammed into me without warning. Dad's booming laugh, the feel of his rough hands lifting me up onto his shoulders. Samantha's jealous little frown when she thought he loved me more. She had never gotten over it. Even back then, she'd been scheming, finding ways to push me out, to make herself the golden child. I dropped to my knees in the cold, damp grass, the fury draining out of me all at once, leaving behind a hollow ache. I hadn't just lost my father to death. I had lost him to her lies long before he ever closed his eyes for the last time. She poisoned him against me, whispered doubts into his ear when he was too weak to fight them off. By the time he died, he barely looked at me. And yet somehow, even through the fog she wrapped around him, he had tried to leave me something, a final act of love that she couldn't stand. The documents I had found, buried deep in an old file box in his workshop, hidden under piles of junk, had been my salvation. A copy of the first will, untouched and untainted. His real wishes. Proof that he had intended for us to share everything equally. Proof that Samantha had forged a newer one, shoving my name out like it was a stain she couldn't scrub clean. Finding it had been like pulling a knife out of my own back and shoving it into hers instead. I heard footsteps approaching, crunching, cautiously over the gravel, and I knew before I even turned my head that it was her, Samantha. She was crying, a pitiful, ugly sound that grated against the night air. "Please," she rasped, voice hoarse and trembling. "We can fix this. We can tell them it was all a misunderstanding. I made a mistake. I didn't mean to hurt you." I stood slowly, turning to face her, the moonlight catching the tear tracks, staining her perfect makeup. For a fleeting second, I almost believed she was sorry. Almost. But then I remembered every lie, every manipulation, every time she smiled in my face while twisting the knife deeper into my back. I took a step toward her and she flinched. Good. She should be afraid. She should feel what it was like to have her entire world yanked out from under her. You didn't make a mistake, I said, my voice low and lethal. You made a choice. She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off with a sharp, savage motion of my hand. Save your breath, Samantha. It's over. You burned every bridge. You buried every chance. You can't lie your way out of this one. I could see the realization settle into her bones, the crushing weight of her failure. Her shoulders sagged, her lips quivered, and for the first time in her life, Samantha had no comeback, no spin, no way to weasel her way free. I turned my back on her, not out of mercy, but because she wasn't worth another second of my time. I walked away, each step heavier than the last, but with a grim satisfaction grounding me. I had taken back what was mine. I had destroyed her kingdom of lies, and she would spend the rest of her life sifting through the ashes, knowing she had no one to blame but herself. The days that followed were a battlefield littered with wreckage, and Samantha stumbled through them like a ghost trapped in a war she had started but could no longer control. The family turned on her with a speed that surprised even me. Relatives, who had once cooed over her brilliance and beauty, now looked at her with thinly veiled contempt. Their polite smiles sharpened into razors. She had gambled on their blind adoration and lost spectacularly. And I made damn sure she felt every second of it. I didn't hide what she had done. I didn't soften it. Didn't let the truth get buried under excuses. I met with every family member, personally, handed them copies of the documents, laid out the evidence with brutal precision. I wanted them to see it, to understand it, to feel the depth of her betrayal in their bones. Every wide-eyed gasp, every shaking head, every whispered, "How could she?" was another nail in the coffin of her golden reputation. I watched her crumble. From a distance, watched her world fall apart like a house of cards in a hurricane. And I didn't feel even a sliver of pity. Samantha tried to fight back at first, lashing out like a cornered animal. She called me a liar, a thief, a traitor to the family. She tried to spin new lies, desperate, clumsy stories about how I had pressured Dad, how I had misunderstood his intentions. But it was too late. The damage was done. Her words sounded hollow, pathetic, coming from a mouth that had spent so many years twisting the truth into knots. No one listened. No one believed her anymore. It wasn't just the inheritance. It was everything she had built her life upon. Shattered. Her friends stopped returning her calls. Her boyfriend, a slick, shallow man who had clearly been more interested in her money than her heart, dumped her in a public scene that left her sobbing outside a restaurant. Her job, tied to the prestige of our family's name, slipped through. Her fingers like smoke when her employers heard the whispers, saw the evidence. Every carefully constructed facade she had built came crashing down around her, and I stood there, stone-faced, watching the ruin unfold. Meanwhile, I took control of the estate, the house, the land, the accounts, all of it. I moved into the old family home, the one she had practically drooled over, the one she had imagined herself ruling like a queen. I walked the creaking halls alone at night, feeling the weight of the past pressing down around me, the memories of laughter and betrayal blending into a heavy fog that clung to the walls. Some nights I thought I could still hear Dad's voice, faint and broken, full of regrets he never had the chance to voice aloud. I wasn't naive enough to think this victory would heal everything, but it was mine, and she would never take it away again. The first time Samantha showed up at the house, it was raining hard, sheets of water pounding against the earth like the sky itself was furious. I opened the door to find her standing there, drenched, makeup streaked down her face, clutching a thin jacket around her shivering body. She looked smaller than I remembered, like the storm had beaten her down to her true size. Pathetic, defeated. She tried to speak, her teeth chattering from the cold, but no words came out. I stared at her, the woman who had made my life a living. Hell, who had stolen my father's final kindness, who would have erased me from existence if she could. For a long moment, we just stood there, two broken pieces of the same shattered family. Then I closed the door in her face, the heavy oak slamming shut with a sound like finality itself. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood, listening to the pounding rain, the muffled sound of her sobs outside. I could have let her in. I could have offered her mercy. But some wounds are too deep to forgive, too poisoned to heal. I chose silence. She didn't come back after that. Maybe she finally understood. Maybe she finally saw the full weight of what she had done. It didn't matter. The line had been drawn. She was no longer my sister. She was nothing but a cautionary tale, a ghost left to wander the ruins of her own making. And me? I stayed. I rebuilt. I tore down the lies brick by brick and laid the foundations of something real, something honest, something she would never again be allowed to touch. The house was mine now. The past was mine. And I would guard it with everything I had. Winter settled over the house like a heavy shroud, burying the orchards in white, muffling the world until it felt like I was the last person left alive. I spent my days working on the property, fixing the things Samantha never cared about, restoring the places she had seen only as dollar signs. I patched up the cracked windows in Dad's old workshop, repaired the sagging fence at the edge of the orchard, and cleaned out the attic that smelled like dust and forgotten dreams. Every nail I hammered, every board I replaced, was a vow. I promised that this place would live again, without her poison corroding it from the inside. Some nights, when the wind howled down from the hills and rattled the bare branches like bones, I would sit by the fireplace, staring into the flames, feeling the ghosts press close. Dad's absence was a wound that never fully closed. I thought about all the conversations we should have had, all the truths I should have shouted while he was still breathing. Samantha had stolen so much more than money or land. She had stolen time, stolen love, stolen the chance for me to hear my father say, just once more, "I'm proud of you." And now he was gone, and the words would remain locked in my own skull, forever. A cruel, empty echo. The first Christmas after it all fell apart was the hardest. I decorated the house alone, stringing up lights that blinked wearily against the darkness, dragging the old tree down from the attic and setting it up, crooked in the living room. I found a battered box of ornaments from when we were kids, handmade things, childish and ugly and precious beyond words. I hung them carefully, one by one, hands trembling, remembering a time before betrayal had made monsters out of blood. There was a knock at the door on Christmas Eve, soft and hesitant. For a moment, a stupid, aching hope flared in my chest. Dad, alive after all, home from some long, strange journey. But of course, it was her, Samantha. She stood there on the porch, thinner, paler, a shadow of the girl who had once ruled every room she walked into. She didn't speak this time. She just held out a small box wrapped in crumpled silver paper, her hands shaking. I didn't move. I didn't reach for it. I just stared at her, the chasm between us yawning wider with every heartbeat. She set the box down carefully on the step, her eyes never leaving mine, searching for something she would never find again. Forgiveness, family, love. Whatever bond had once tied us together had been severed, hacked through by her own hand, and no last-minute gift could stitch it back together. She opened her mouth, as if to say something, anything, but the words caught and died in her throat. I closed the door slowly, shutting her out of the warmth, the light, the life she had thrown away. Through the window, I watched her stand there, for a long moment, shoulders sagging, before she finally turned and disappeared into the snow. I never opened the box. I threw it into the fire without looking inside, watching the flames devour it greedily, reducing whatever plea or apology it contained to ash. Some things are better left burned. As the months crawled by, Samantha's presence faded further into the distance. She moved away, rumors said, to a dingy apartment in a city far from here, taking odd jobs, struggling to stitch together the scraps of a life she had torn apart with her own greed. I heard whispers. Failed. Relationships. Lost jobs. Loneliness gnawing at her like rats in the dark. I didn't chase the details. I didn't need to. I knew enough. I built a new life in the house she had once coveted so fiercely. A life stitched together with slow, painful care. It wasn't grand. It wasn't easy. But it was mine. I planted new trees in the orchard, young and stubborn, their roots digging deep into the cold earth. A defiant promise that something good could still grow from all this wreckage. On warm evenings, I would sit on the porch with a glass of whiskey, watching the sun bleed out behind the hills, feeling the bruised, battered heart inside me beat steady and strong. I was not healed. I would never be healed. Not completely. Some betrayals carve scars so deep they become part of your bones. But I was alive. I was standing. And every breath I took was another reminder that she had failed to destroy me. Let her rot in the ruins of her own ambition. Let her remember every night she lies awake, alone, that she could have had everything: family, love, loyalty. And she chose instead to have nothing. I survived, she didn't, and that was the truest justice of all.